So Marco Polo is another first in Doctor Who history, for a few reasons. Most notably, it's the first true historical, based around the historical figure Marco Polo and his travels. But it's also the first for a much more upsetting reason, that being it's the first to feature missing episodes, and sadly all 7 episodes are missing. Fortunately, the soundtrack survives, which I'm very glad about, as Marco Polo is definitely a great serial and one of the best historicals. So as a 7-parter, there's a lot to talk about, especially since the plot doesn't slow. Like most historicals, the budget was able to be spread much further, with BBC stock being far more equipped to create and clothe a historical setting. So there are characters galore, both big and small, and massive scale for locations. Plot-wise, we see our quartet travelling with Marco Polo, the warlord Tegana and Ping-Cho across the Panama Plateau, the Gobi Desert and Cathay to Peking to meet with Kublai Khan, while being in constant danger from Tegana. But that's a very simplistic breakdown of the plot, as John Lucarotti's script has a lot going on. The TARDIS is broken, and so Marco offers to assist the quartet by having them join his caravan and allowing the Doctor to repair the ship. But it's revealed that Marco has a plan to trade the TARDIS for his freedom from the Khan. And despite this seemingly being selfish and a villainous move, Marco is shown to be desperate for his freedom and to return home, and promises to not strand the quartet and take them with him. Marco is a very complex character. His actions make him stand opposed to our leads, but he's still a good guy. He trusts the quartet far more than he perhaps should, and it blows up in his face when he is betrayed by them. It hurts him personally, and Mark Eden's performance is just amazing. But at the same time, Tegana is trying to kill Marco, but is constantly getting forward, but is able to remain on Marco's good side, manipulating him to an extent. He pretends to be on his side and work in his favour, notably when he offers to go to the oasis and collect water, but doesn't return, and is able to get away with his lies, saying that there were bandits despite the lack of evidence that there were any. Tegana's status and importance makes him invulnerable. Even when Marco is given evidence and his own misgivings, it's not enough for him to act. The scenes where they sit down and talk are just great. Tegana tries to get rid of the quartet as he believes they are evil spirits, but even his word cannot get Marco to turn his back on them. Darren Nesbitt is just as strong as Eden in his performance, and ultimately their conflict reaches conclusion with their sword fight, which leads to Tegana's death. We also have the plotline around Ping-Cho, who is travelling to Peking for an arranged marriage. During the journey, she creates a strong bond with Susan as the only other person her age in the caravan. Like Marco, she also goes through an arc about choosing whose side she's on, but makes up her mind much faster, being able to see Tegana for who he truly is and tries all she can to help the quartet. When talking with Marco, she hides the fact that she knows that the Doctor has a second key for the TARDIS, and even steals the ship's keys to give to Susan so the quartet can escape. And towards the end, she makes up her mind to try and escape and leaves the caravan in an attempt to return home to avoid the marriage, being conned in the process before being rescued by Ian. Her story reaches its conclusion with the death of her husband-to-be, but chooses to remain in Peking instead of returning home. Despite being the youngest cast member, Sienna Merton gives a great performance and can stand against her fellow actors. On our quartet, the Doctor spends most of episode 2 asleep, but is a very strong character in every other episode. We still see his lack of respect towards people he sees as less intelligent than him, insulting Marco and calling him
"You poor, pathetic, stupid savage."
when he seizes the TARDIS after the quartet try to escape in episode 4, and there's his breakdown into laughter at the end of episode 1 when Marco takes the ship key for the first time.
Come on, come and sit down. Doctor, he's serious.
I know he is, yes.
What you going to do?
Oh, I haven't the faintest idea.
Apparently it's a flub. Maybe Hartnell was just at the end of his tether, backed up by the fact he was too ill to take part in rehearsals for episode 2. But some of the best moments for the Doctor come in episodes 6 and 7, when he's interacting with Kublai Khan. Both are old men with health problems and end up becoming friends over it, playing backgammon in which the Doctor wins half of Asia, until he loses everything where he's trying to get the TARDIS back. Their scenes together are just filled with humour, notably when they hobble off together, and when the Emperor shows up and asks if the Khan is gambling. Ian, on the other hand, spends most of his time with Marco, taking up the reins of the lead and being the one who mostly drives the plot to try and convince Marco to return the TARDIS to them. There's a lot of moments between Ian and Marco. A personal favourite is when Ian is asked where he found the keys after lying that he was the one who found them, and Marco's line to Ian's lack of response is brilliant.
Ian, don't you see it doesn't matter to me why you lied? What is important is the fact that you are capable of lying.
So you don't believe me when I say I came from another time?
If I did, Ian, I would give you the key.
All of these scenes feature moments of gold. Ian doesn't show him a piece of technology to prove his point, he just explains, and the fact that Marco is prepared to believe him but can't is what makes their dynamic so strong. Even when Marco lets Ian go to find Ping-Cho, Tegana raises his doubts and so Tegana is dispatched to follow him.
Marco! The magician's caravan. Why do you think Ian offered so readily, so eagerly to go back after Ping-Cho.
What's your point?
Ping-Cho could be anywhere. The chances of finding her are very small, but Ian knows where the caravan is. He knows exactly where it is.
You're wrong, Tegana. I think I know something of Ian's character.
You can't know it all.
Despite the time they've spent together and his trust in Ian, his doubts are still there. Barbara also gets a good dynamic with Marco. As a history teacher, she has knowledge about Marco which she can't reveal to him, and often accidentally teases it, notably how she knows he will return to Venice. But if I'm going to point to Barbara's best moment, that comes in episode 2. As mentioned before, Hartnell was unable to attend rehearsals and so only appears briefly, and so a scene between him and Susan goes to Barbara and Susan instead. Barbara shows her compassionate side to her fullest, as she comforts Susan. We haven't really seen moments like this between the characters, and it ended up being Barbara who is the voice of comfort just feels right. It's a very nice scene. We also see more of Barbara's independent side as she follows Tegana without telling anyone, which leads to her getting captured and nearly killed. And even Susan is stronger than she was previously. She's certainly the least used of the leads, being the only one without a strong dynamic with Marco and Tegana, instead getting a dynamic with Ping-Cho. Both being teenagers, this gives Susan a chance to interact with her character in a way she hasn't had a chance to before. She is the most resilient to Ping-Cho's arranged marriage and is the main influence in her character arc, leading to her running away and risking her own safety for the quartet. But there is less screaming in this one. Although Susan definitely gets the short end of the straw as outside of her dynamic with Ping-Cho, there isn't much more to her in this one, but I do think her friendship with Ping-Cho and how she gives her the ability to be somewhat rebellious is very charming. I think from how much I focus on the characters really shows that a lot of the plot points are built around their characters and their interactions. The events are driven almost entirely by the tension between the people in Marco's caravan. For instance, Tegana's plans are sabotaged by the presence of the quartet and his attempts to get rid of them fail due to Marco's promise to them. He can't abandon them since he's taken the TARDIS, and even he doubts if he was right to do so.
How can that be? You claimed it in the Khan's name.
It was wrong of me to do so.
You wear the Khan's gold seal that gives you your authority to take what you will.
When the cause is just, this was not.
What was it then?
Selfish.
But since this is a historical, we have to discuss the educational part of this serial, and it's good. Lucarotti's script doesn't force that information down your throat. The plot sometimes stops for a moment so that a bit of information can be dumped, notably when Ling Tao arrives and the discussion forms around how far he's rowed.
When did you leave Shengtu?
Yesterday, my lord.
Yesterday?
What?
That's 300 miles away, isn't it? We change horses every league, my lord.
Every league.
And you ride without rest until you reach your destination?
Yes, my lady.
I would have thought it was a physical impossibility.
Our bodies would be shaken to pieces, my lord, were it not for these. Bound tight like this one on my head.
But even then, it's woven in quite well. The actual surprise of the characters of the information helps to distract from it's just someone telling you historical facts. Beyond that, we have other little moments, like when the Doctor asks about the way stations and how many there are throughout Cathay.
Mr. Marco, these way stations, do you have many of these in Cathay?
Yes, the Khan has them dotted at regular intervals throughout his domain. And those who work in his service and wear the Khan's gold seal have the right to demand anything they may require. Provisions, horses, shelter.
It's clearly woven in so you don't feel talked down to, plus often adds information to the plot, like how Marco mentions the gold seal, which is what allows him to take the TARDIS. And I can't not give a mention to when Ping-Cho tells the tale of Aladdin and the Hashin. This is definitely one of the scenes which suffers the most from a lack of footage. The tale requires preparation and is a performance which just can't be replaced by still images. But this serial really sets a high bar for all future historicals and definitely earns the 7-episode running time. The last thing to talk about is obviously its missing status. As I said at the start, it's the first missing story, with all 7 episodes missing. But unlike many later stories, there are no surviving clips, leaving only the telesnaps, which we have for 6 episodes as 4 doesn't have any. But luckily, due to the scale of the production, there are many surviving images, including many of colour, allowing for reconstructions to be of amazing quality. And you know what? The reconstruction flies by. It's just that good of a story. Overall, this is certainly a favourite of mine. Almost certainly my favourite historical and maybe the best of the first season for me. But that could change. Obviously, it's a difficult watch as there's no existing clips and so telesnap reconstructions are the only way to view it. But the soundtrack is a must listen as it just pulls you into this well constructed world that's just out of reach. Hopefully one day it'll be returned to the archives. And for the first time, the serial doesn't end with a cliffhanger for the next serial. So all there is to say is, next time, the Keys of Marinus, and the return of Terry Nation.